Listen up, because what you think you know about the MP40 is probably wrong. Yeah, you've seen it in every World War II movie. Sleek, intimidating. The weapon clutched by German soldiers in 1,000 combat scenes. But here's the brutal truth nobody tells you. American G is despised this weapon. Not because it was deadly, but because when push came to shove, it failed. And before we dive deep into why this iconic gun became Germany's tactical nightmare, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell for Army history, because we're about to expose the dark reality behind one of history's most misunderstood weapons. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. We dig deeper than anyone else, uncovering the stories that textbooks deliberately ignore. Now, let's tear apart the myth of the MP40. To understand why the MP40 turned into such a controversial weapon, we need to rewind to where this nightmare began. The muddy, blood-soaked trenches of World War I. Picture this. It's 1916. You're crammed in a narrow trench, water up to your ankles, rats the size of cats scurrying past corpses. The enemy is maybe 30 feet away. Your rifle? A bolt-action monster designed to kill someone half a mile away. Completely useless in these cramped, hellish conditions. Traditional military thinking had become obsolete overnight. Generals trained in cavalry charges and open-field warfare suddenly faced a problem they'd never imagined. How do you fight when nobody can move? For the first time in human history, aircraft provided real-time reconnaissance. No surprise attacks, no flanking maneuvers. Just two massive armies staring at each other across a wasteland of barbed wire and corpses, shelling each other into oblivion. The stalemate was complete and absolutely horrifying. Both sides threw men at these fortified lines in suicidal waves. Hundreds of thousands died for gains measured in yards. The traditional weapons, accurate, powerful, long-range rifles, meant absolutely nothing when you were fighting hand-to-hand in a muddy hole. This is where Germany made its first brilliant move. Instead of continuing the insanity of mass charges, German commands started deploying elite Stoßtruppen, stormtroopers, small, lethal teams that would crawl across no man's land under darkness, infiltrate enemy trenches, and unleash absolute hell before anyone knew what hit them. But they needed a new weapon, something compact, devastating at close range, and capable of sustained fire in tight spaces. Enter the MP-18, the world's first practical submachine gun. Designed by Hugo Schmeisser and manufactured by Bergmann, this weapon changed warfare forever. It fired 9mm pistol rounds at 400 to 500 rounds per minute from a 32-round drum magazine. In the confined chaos of trench warfare, it was unstoppable. German stormtroopers introduced what they called walking fire, advancing while continuously spraying automatic fire. Allied soldiers had never seen anything like it. The psychological impact was devastating. Here's a perspective rarely discussed. Imagine being a British soldier, exhausted after years of static warfare, suddenly facing an enemy that moves through your defenses like water, weapons chattering continuously. The terror was real. The 1918 spring offensive proved the concept worked. Though Germany ultimately lost the war, they'd just shown the world the future of infantry combat, and they were taking notes for next time. The Treaty of Versailles tried to castrate Germany's military capability. They limited army size, banned certain weapons, and imposed humiliating restrictions. But here's what historians often gloss over. Germany never stopped preparing. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, German engineers quietly refined the submachine gun concept. The MP-28 improved on the MP-18's design. They tested tactics and weapons in the Spanish Civil War, a dress rehearsal for the coming apocalypse. By 1938, Germany was ready to unveil something special. The MP-38 represented a radical departure from traditional firearms design. No wood, all metal and early plastic. A folding stock that made it incredibly compact. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement about modern warfare. But here's the critical analysis. The MP-38 looked futuristic, but that aesthetic came with serious problems. The bakelite grips and metal receiver conducted heat like crazy. After firing a few magazines, the weapon became almost too hot to hold. German soldiers quickly learned to wear gloves, not for warmth, but to avoid burning their hands on their own weapon. From a logistical standpoint, this was a design flaw that should have been caught. It suggests rushed development, prioritizing appearance, and manufacturing ease over soldier comfort. This pattern would repeat itself. Only about 8,000 MP38s existed when Germany invaded Poland in 1939. For an army of millions, that's a drop in the bucket. Germany needed submachine guns fast. The MP38 was too expensive, too slow to manufacture. The solution? The MP40. On paper, it made perfect sense. Keep the core design, but replace expensive machine parts with stamped metal. Use spot welds instead of careful assembly. Simplify everything possible. The cost dropped to 57 Reichsmarks per unit, about $1,200 today. Compare that to the American Thompson at over $2,000, and you can see why German planners were excited. But here's the uncomfortable truth that gets buried in most histories. The rush to mass production created a weapon with critical flaws. Early MP40s jammed constantly. Soldiers reported malfunctions in the field, often at the worst possible moments. When your life depends on your weapon, occasional jamming isn't acceptable. It's lethal. Well, Germany did fix many issues in later production runs, but this reveals a troubling pattern. Deploying weapons before they're truly ready. The pressure to arm millions of soldiers meant accepting compromises that would later cost lives. The MP40 did fix one dangerous problem from the MP38, accidental discharge. The MP38 had no proper safety. Drop it wrong and it could fire. Imagine being in a crowded truck with your squad, someone drops their weapon, and it goes off. This actually happened. The MP40's dual-slot safety notch solved this, allowing the bolt to be locked in place. But the magazine design? That remained fundamentally flawed. Everything changed when Germany invaded the Soviet Union. The Wehrmacht expected quick victory. What they got was an industrial-scale nightmare that would consume them. In the ruins of Stalingrad, or room-to-room, floor-to-floor fighting made the Eastern Front a submachine gun war. And here, the MP40's weaknesses became fatally obvious. Soviet soldiers carried the PPSh-41. Crude, simple, stamped from sheet metal in factories that looked more like tractor plants than armories. But it worked, and more importantly, it worked better. Let's compare them honestly. The PPSh-41 fired 900 to 1,200 rounds per minute compared to the MP40's 500 to 550. In close quarters combat, that's the difference between life and death. You kick down a door, 3 enemy soldiers are inside. The PPSh could empty its 71-round drum magazine in under 4 seconds, putting a wall of lead downrange before anyone could react. The MP40? More controlled, yes. More accurate for sustained fire, absolutely. But in the apocalyptic close-quarters fighting of Stalingrad, you didn't need accuracy, you needed volume of fire. Here's the perspective military analysts often miss. The MP40 was designed for a different kind of war, a mobile, mechanized conflict where combined arms and tactical superiority would prevail. What Germany got instead was grinding attrition warfare in bombed-out cities and frozen forests, where individual soldiers needed weapons that worked in the worst possible conditions. The PPSh was nearly indestructible. Mud, snow, blood, it kept firing. The MP40's precision manufacturing meant tighter tolerances, which meant more opportunities for malfunction. Soviet production outpaced Germany 6-1. Eventually, German soldiers started using captured PPSh-41s in such numbers that it became the second most common submachine gun in German service. Think about that. East Germany was so desperate for reliable submachine guns that they used their enemy's weapon against them. They even converted 10,000 captured PPSh-41s to fire 9mm ammunition and work with MP40 magazines. That's not the sign of a superior weapon. That's the sign of a critical shortage. Here's what really made American soldiers hate the MP40. The magazines. The MP40 used a single-stack feed system inherited from the World War I era MP18. Rounds sat side by side in the magazine body, then funneled into a single column at the top. Only one round fed at a time. In clean, controlled conditions, works fine. In the mud, blood, and chaos of actual combat? Disaster. The thin steel magazines bent easily. Dirt and debris caused constant misfeeds. The springs wore out. When soldiers quickly learned not to load all 32 rounds because a fully compressed spring increased jam probability. German manuals explicitly warned soldiers not to grip the weapon by the magazine, only use the small foregrip. But in combat, instinct takes over. Soldiers grabbed whatever they could, and bent magazines meant jammed weapons. Compare this to the American Thompson's double-stack, double-feed magazine design. Rounds loaded from both sides alternately, creating redundancy. If one feed path had an issue, the other might still work. More reliable, more forgiving of battlefield conditions. The British Sten and American M3 grease gun weren't pretty, but their magazines worked. They were simpler, more robust, more tolerant of abuse. From an engineering perspective, this is inexcusable. By 1940, better magazine designs existed. Germany chose to stick with an outdated system to maintain parts commonality and simplify production. They prioritized manufacturing efficiency over soldier survivability. That's a choice, and it got people killed. Here's something that doesn't make it into most documentaries. Allied soldiers were forbidden from using captured MP40s in many units. Why? Because the MP40 had a distinctive firing sound. In the confusion of combat, other Allied soldiers would hear that characteristic German weapon report and return fire at their own men. During the D-Day landings at Pointe du Hoc, U.S. Rangers picked up MP40s from dead German soldiers. 4 Rangers were later found dead beside those captured weapons, killed by friendly fire. This wasn't an isolated incident. It happened repeatedly throughout the war. The 9mm Parabellum round sounded completely different from American .45 ACP weapons. In the smoke and chaos of battle, soldiers made split-second decisions based on sound. Using enemy weapons got you killed by your own side. From a tactical perspective, this represents an often overlooked cost of warfare: weapon interoperability and identification. Modern militaries train extensively on threat recognition, specifically to avoid these tragedies. But in World War II, the sound of an MP40 meant enemy contact, period. American soldiers also simply preferred their own weapons. The .45 ACP round had superior stopping power at close range. The Thompson might have been heavier and more expensive, but it was reliable. The M3 grease gun was ridiculously simple. No charging handle, just a finger hole to pull the bolt back. But it worked. Let's look at production numbers because they tell a brutal story. Germany manufactured roughly 1.1 million MP40s throughout the entire war. Sounds impressive until you compare it to what everyone else was doing. The Soviet Union cranked out approximately 6 million PPSh-41s. That's 6 times more than Germany's iconic submachine gun. Britain, despite having a smaller industrial base in fighting on multiple fronts, still produced around 4 million Sten guns. Even the American M3 grease gun, introduced later in the war, reached about 700,000 units, while the Thompson hit around 1.5 million. These numbers reveal something critical. Germany's legendary weapon was actually outproduced and outclassed by nearly everyone else. Even more telling, Germany manufactured 14 million Kar-98K rifles during the same period, while clearly showing where their production priorities actually lay. They never truly committed to the submachine gun concept the way the Soviets did, and it showed on the battlefield. By 1943, Germany faced uncomfortable facts. Submachine guns lacked range. Bolt-action rifles lacked firepower. The MP40 had critical reliability issues. Soviet production was overwhelming them. The solution? The Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first true assault rifle. This is where Germany actually got it right. The STG-44 fired an intermediate 7.92 by 33mm cartridge, more powerful than a pistol round, less than a full rifle cartridge. It offered 30-round magazine capacity, selective fire, and effectiveness out to 400 meters. It was everything the MP40 wasn't. Versatile, reliable, and effective across multiple combat ranges. And here's the critical analysis. The STG-44's development represents an implicit admission that the MP40 concept was insufficient. If submachine guns were truly adequate for modern warfare, why invest massive resources in developing a completely new weapon category? Germany produced over 400,000 STG-44s before the war ended, a remarkable number considering the desperate circumstances. By 1944, the STG-44 had replaced the MP40 in both production priority and tactical doctrine. The MP40 had become obsolete in German military thinking before the war even ended. So here's the truth about the MP40 that movies and video games won't tell you. It was an adequate weapon that became legendary through exposure, not excellence. It looked distinctive, appeared in countless combat photos, and became culturally iconic. But American soldiers who faced it, they weren't impressed. They'd seen it jam. They'd seen German soldiers desperately clearing malfunctions while under fire. They'd seen Germans carrying captured Soviet weapons because their own weren't good enough. The MP40 worked when everything went right. But warfare is precisely when everything goes wrong. The weapons that matter aren't the ones that function perfectly on a clean range. They're the ones that keep firing when covered in mud, frozen in Russian winters, or dropped in the chaos of urban combat. By that standard, the MP40 failed. The Soviets understood this. Their PPSh-41 was ugly, crude, and simple. But it worked when soldiers needed it most. Function over form, reliability over elegance. American and British forces learned the same lesson. On the M3 grease gun in Sten were literally stamped from sheet metal with minimal machining, costing a fraction of the MP40's price. They weren't pretty, but they worked. This is why Army history exists, to cut through the myths and show you the uncomfortable truths that others ignore. We don't just repeat the same tired stories. We dig deeper. We analyze. We question. The MP40 has been glorified for decades, but the soldiers who actually fought with and against it, they knew better. Here's what I need you to do right now. First, subscribe to Army History if you haven't already. We're building a community of people who demand real history, not Hollywood fantasy. Second, hit that notification bell. Our next video exposes an even bigger military myth that will completely change how you view World War II weaponry. Third, leave a comment right now telling me, what other legendary weapons do you think might not live up to the hype? I read every comment, and your suggestions directly influence what we cover next. And finally, share this video. Your friends think they know military history. Show them they don't. Challenge them. Make them question what they've been told. Because here at Army History, we don't just tell stories, we destroy myths. The MP40 was supposed to be Germany's answer to close-quarters warfare. Instead, it became a lesson in what happens when theory meets battlefield reality. Don't let anyone tell you different. This is Army History. We tell the truth. Always. Now get out there and spread real knowledge. I'll see you in the next one.